Okay, so we are going to cover General Studies Paper 3 analysis, which has been over recently. So we'll be covering broadly the themes, overview of the expected themes, and how one's supposed to write a better answer, all that. So if you look at some of the lessons that we're supposed to learn from GS Paper 3 are, so again, as usual, from agriculture, around 4 questions are asked in GS Paper 3 Economy, but this year themes slightly seems to be irrigation, water, use of nanotechnology. Apart from that, in agriculture, why high value crops are selected by the farmers, supply chain management in agriculture. So these are broad themes from which questions were focused on from agriculture. Coming to fiscal policy budgeting, so surprisingly one new theme is identified by the examiner called Fiscal Health Index. Generally we expect questions from fiscal policy, FRBM Act, Finance Commission, but slightly little bit away from fiscal policy, the question called Fiscal Health Index, its relevance is being asked. Apart from that, as we expected from industry chapter, so semiconductor industry, because of current affairs relevance, from industry chapter seems to be straightforward question. Semiconductor industry was asked. Apart from that, if you look at some more economy questions, the focused areas are Human Development Index, and surprisingly, Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index is the new theme that examiner tried to focus on. So if you just understand the nature of the questions, apart from that, if you look at multilateralism versus protectionism, so in international trade, as we expected, the broad theme is actually multilateralism in the context of globalization, protectionism. So in simple, protectionism versus multilateralism. So if you look at the questions that were asked broadly from economy are, compared to other papers, especially GS Paper 2, GS Paper 3 seems to be doable with little bit moderate knowledge. Those who are reading regularly newspaper and current affairs, probably they can easily attempt. Now what are the lessons that we have to learn from this GS Paper 3 before we go for detailed analysis and answer writing practice? If you look at industry chapter broadly seems to be highly pitching because PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, is from industry chapter. As we have been reading PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, advantages, disadvantages, challenges, all that. So coming to agriculture specific, depletion of groundwater table. What are the reasons for depletion of groundwater table? What are the reasons for choosing high value crops? Food processing industry. Use of nanotechnology in agriculture. So in agriculture, supply chain management, depletion of groundwater table, importance of food processing industry and employment growth, and use of nanotechnology in agriculture. So if you look at broadly those who have been following the themes and micro themes along with current affairs, the paper seems to be easy only, paper seems to be doable only. So it appears that examiner is interested in well balanced approach of linking current affairs with the static part. So the lessons that we supposed to learn from this GS Paper 3 are, when you are preparing for GS Paper 3, you need to focus on current affairs related to static aspects. For example, agriculture, industry, land reforms, investment models, poverty and employment, planning niti yog, infrastructure, services. Not just static part alone, we need to focus on current affairs. At least in last 1 year, the relevant current affairs related theme also to be focused. And surprisingly, the wording of the question seems to be inspired from economic survey summary. Those who have done economic survey, very good. At least those who have done economic survey summary, many of the keywords in the question seems to be directly influenced by the themes from economic survey. That's the reason why compulsorily we should study before we give the mains economic survey summary and the relevant budget summary also. So it means some of the questions origin relevance is actually from not only static part syllabus that is mentioned, plus current affairs relevant themes, plus economic survey, plus the relevant budget summary in whichever year we are going to give the attempt. So it appears as if that examiner is interested more in well-balanced holistic knowledge of static as well as current affairs. Now I'll be explaining the question, theme, micro theme, how introduction is supposed to be there, how conclusion, and what value addition points we can make. Okay, so with this brief analysis of GS paper 3 from economy, agriculture, industry, fiscal health index, human development index, and if you look at from international trade, multilateralism versus protectionism, and from inequality perspective, human development index, along with that inequality adjusted human development index. So let's look at micro topic theme wise. The first question, distinguish between human development index and the inequality adjusted human development index with special reference to India. Why is IHDI considered a better indicator of inclusive growth? So if you understand theme of the question, especially question number 1, the broad theme of the question is inclusive growth. Broad theme of the question is inclusive growth. In a broad theme called inclusive growth, the question that is being asked is human development index, inequality adjusted human development index, and then second part of the question is why inequality adjusted human development index is a better indicator. So let's understand the demand of the question first. So what is the demand of the question, sir? If you break down the first question into parts, inclusive growth is the broader theme, in that human development index is the micro theme, in that comparison was asked, and second part of the question, relevance is asked. Sir, why is this question important? Can you guess this question? Was this question predictable? Yes. If you are following newspaper, there were some reports about World Bank report of Gini coefficient regarding inequalities and equalities in India, and there was something called Kuznets curve. Kuznets curve application. Now all of you know that I'm just explaining why this question was asked. According to World Bank report, Gini coefficient estimates income inequalities. So income inequalities are broadly estimated through an index or through an indicator called Gini coefficient on scale of 0 to 1. We consider 0 as perfect equality, we consider 1 as perfect inequality, and we see Gini coefficient is estimation of inequalities. So there was some report about India's inequalities in which World Bank talks about how inequalities are there in India. Also Kuznets curve, father of national income, Kuznets curve broadly says if income growth, or you can say if economic growth is happening in a country, initially income inequalities would increase. When economic growth becomes economic development, inequalities would decrease. However, we found that despite impressive economic growth, inequalities in India are not coming down. So these were the context in which the question number 1 was framed. Because of this Gini coefficient in the news, Kuznets curve application in the news, in the broader concept of inclusive growth, the question was asked human development index and inequality human development index. So all of us know that human development index is actually released by United Nations Development Program. So what is the purpose of releasing United Nations Human Development Program, or why is the purpose of Human Development Index? Economic growth should not be estimated only from GDP alone. We should also consider not only economic growth but also living standards. So what are the living standards that indicators are considered? Health, education, standard of living. So sub indicators in this is actually health, education, standard of living. And if you know, in these broader indicators, if you look at accessibility to healthcare, accessibility to education, accessibility to living standards, so certain parameters also are considered, indicators also are considered. However, the theme of the question is not just HDA alone. The theme of the question is Compared to this, inequality also should be adjusted. Now, what is meaning of this, sir? Very simple concept. Once you calculate a country's score in Human Development Index, whatever score that is received by a country, that score is adjusted by considering inequalities also in this country. In simple, if inequalities are more, the original score in HDI will decrease. If inequalities are adjusted, meaning first we calculate Human Development Index, the score is calculated by considering health, education, standard of living. Whatever the score that a country receives, that would be adjusted towards based on inequalities also. Which means the greater the inequalities, the score will be adjusted. For example, India specific, question also talks about India specific. Human Development Index score of India was roughly around 0.61 something, some number. So however, because of inequality that are presented in the Indian society, when this HDI, Human Development Index, is adjusted to Inequality Human Development Index, somewhere it becomes 0.41, which means score got decreased. This is the theme of the question. The broader theme of the question is this. Not only Human Development Index is considered, first part of the question distinguishes between Human Development Index and Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index. Simple logic. So HDA calculates only health, education, standard of living. It is not adjust in the inequalities. So inequalities are again intergeneration inequalities, intrageneration inequalities. Both are present. So based on the inequalities, we will adjust the score. So roughly if you give the numbers also, 0.6 some odd number was earlier India's HDA score. After it is adjusted to inequality index, the score got decreased. The second part of the question, why is inequality human development index seems to be better compared to human development index? Simple answer, just because economic growth is happening in country, it does not mean that economic well-being also will happen. So estimation of GDP growth is only merely quantitative but not qualitative. Even human development index also is not considering the economic inequalities, because one of the criticism on India is that despite impressive economic growth, still equitable distribution of wealth is not happening, inclusive growth is not happening, the differences between the rich and poor is widening. That is the reason why, second part of the question, why inequality adjusted human development index is a better indicator of inclusive growth. It accounts for distribution, it talks about justice, it talks about inequality cost, it talks about policies for inclusion, it talks about true well-being of the state, it enables accountability for the policy makers also. It's not just enough if you just claim that we have spent this much money on the public and welfare policies, no, but also try to show them while reducing inequalities. So that is the reason why inequality adjusted human development index is a better indicator compared to human development index. And value addition you can quote World Bank report on Gini coefficient. Also you can quote about Kuznets curve, and finally you can conclude that yes, compared to human development index, inequality adjusted human development index seems to be a better indicator. So this is brief theme of question, but if you look at the answer as such, define what is human development index. So after that, just compare the human development index and inequality human development index. Also just look at overall. So look at human development index, inequality human development index, and how the score is adjusted specific to India's case. After that, why, second part of the question, inequality human development index is a better indicator compared to human development index. So this is the theme of the first question. But if you look at the second question, slightly seems to be as expected like earlier, but in international trade this theme got dominated. Now what is the theme in this international trade? If you look at the theme of the question seems to be, what are the challenges before the Indian economy when the world is moving away from free trade and multilateralism to protectionism and bilateralism? How can these challenges be met? See, the key and the trap here is correctly understanding the demand of the question. First we have to find out challenges before the Indian economy. when the world is moving away from free trade and multilateralism to protectionism and bilateralism. Now, what is the meaning of the question? What is the key demand of the question? First, we need to understand, when you talk about micro theme, question number 2 is from international trade, foreign trade, international economic organizations. This is the broader theme. In that, what is the micro theme? Micro theme is multilateralism versus protectionism. Also, free trade to bilateralism. A broad theme, if you understand, you can focus. Actually, we'll study in the international trade, foreign trade agreements, international economic organizations, different types of foreign trade agreements. That is the context. The key demand of the question is that, actually, if you look at some of the chapters in economic survey, in foreign trade, international economic organizations, this wording is used actually. So from that words only directly examiners seems to be influenced, where all of you know, we are in globalized world where we are supposed to follow certain principles of WTO, which are referred as most favored nation, national treatment, reciprocity. And simple, most favored nation, equal treatment of all the countries in the international trade, irrespective of your relationship, is called as most favored nation. So what is national treatment, sir? Once foreign goods enter into our country, they should be treated like our own goods. There should not be discrimination between foreign country goods and our country goods once taxes are paid in our country. Reciprocity. You give some favors to us, we give some favor to you. That is called as reciprocity. So a country will become part of some group or trade bloc for its collective interest and individual interest. So India became member of so many international economic organizations to protect its interest, also to protect its bargaining power. So in the process, try to analyze why is the world moving. But anyway, when world is moving away from multilateralism and free trade or free trade agreements to, look at the word, protectionism. Protectionism means to protect its own domestic market and domestic economy, uncertain sections of the people, countries are imposing restrictions, meaning in simple, challenges faced by Indian economy because countries are following protectionism measures. Protectionism measures meaning they don't want to allow Indian goods in their country. So they are trying to impose tariffs on us. They are trying to use quantitative and non-quantitative, tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. In the context of globalization right now, elections are going on in different countries. One of the poll promises in the elections is that protectionism. We don't allow foreign goods. We won't give outsourcing to other companies. And we won't allow foreign people to attract the local domestic voters. So in that context, we need to understand what are the challenges that are faced by Indian economy. See, if you look at, finally we have to introduce WTO basic principles of 3. So most favored nation, national tourism, national trade, and you can say, so most favored nation, national treatment, reciprocity. After writing briefly about them, we can say multilateralism is now questioned, the reason being because of several challenges. So because which, what is the impact? Market access is getting reduced, tariff risk is getting increased, supply chain is getting affected, and non-tariff barriers also are getting affected. Apart from that, global trade seems to be affected because of this. Also, services and investment, and when it is moving from one to other, they are being affected. Now, the essence of the question is that India should try to take efforts on strengthening the domestic economy so that it does not depend exclusively on external sector, or it can withstand if any challenges are there in the external sector. That is the broad theme of the question. So what we are supposed to write? We have to strengthen domestic market, boost manufacturing, boost consumption here, because if you know aggregate demand, so all of you know in national income we will study aggregate demand of a country is measured as C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So we should not only influenced by this X minus M. We should strengthen our domestic economic spending, consumer, investor, government. Also, try to diversify the supply chain so that we are not getting influenced by only some XYZ factor. Supply chain resilience, strategic global trade agreements, diversifying the trade partners. Also, how different countries are partnering with their friends, we should also partner with our friends so that our collective interest will be served. Apart from that, we have to improve our competitiveness. All of you know India is popularly called as office of the world. We are supposed to improve our domestic manufacturing services also. Our service sector growth is externally vulnerable, so we should make it domestic driven economy. So finally we will conclude that yes, India's growth and India's trade is vulnerable for external shocks. However, in the long run, we have to strengthen our domestic economy so that we can withstand the challenges. That is the broad theme. Actually, this question came from Economic Survey, International Trade Observation Sector. So some of the wording of the Economic Survey against multilateralism and protectionism. So in that context, examiner has picked up the question and he used this conveniently for the bilateralism, multilateralism, all this. So if you look at the question and answer, second question if you look at, probably, first you will define right from how post-Cold War world, or you can say in the present circumstances because of Trump tariffs, how protectionism versus multilateralism is being questioned, and WTO actually focuses on free trade. And basic principles of WTO actually talks about free trade without any boundaries. So that was the essence. But again, look at what is happening. Challenges before the Indian economy because of protectionism. So if you look at our growth rate is getting impacted, our FDI, FPI is getting impacted. Apart from that, supply chain vulnerabilities, fragments, service investment. Again, if you look at overall, the theme is simple. Finally, we are saying, despite external sector influence on the Indian economy, if you strengthen the domestic economy will help in both ensuring flexibility in the trade, also service sector growth based economy, also helps in adjusting ourselves from the foreign trade fluctuations. That's the theme of the second question. Now if you look at third question, explain the factors influencing the decision of the farmers on the selection of high value crops in India. Pretty direct question, pretty easy question from agriculture chapter. So if you look at the theme of the question, once again in agriculture static part. And in agriculture static part, cropping pattern is the sub theme. Micro topic theme is actually cropping pattern. So in this cropping pattern, the question that was asked is why farmers are choosing high value crops. So this is the broad theme and sub theme. So regular repeated theme only. But if you look at why this question is asked, according to Economic Survey, it appears that farmers who are cultivating are farmers who are actually interested in horticulture and floriculture, which are high value in demand is increasing. So because of which it appears that examiner has taken this theme, why high value crops are selected by the farmers while cultivating. Simple answer, as Ashok Dalwai committee suggested, how to double the farmer's income. Every farmer is interested in cultivating the crops based on the soil, based on water availability, whichever is economically viable, whichever provides high source of income. So why it appears that farmers are going for high value crops? If you look at, based on the location of their land, if it is suitable and viable according to agroecological conditions, also where supply chain management seems to be good, connectivity, transportation, marketing, and they can sell it. Apart from that, demand, technology, inputs, knowledge, risk management, policy, institutional credit, and socio-economic and household factors such as land holding size, risk-taking capacity, institutional credit, so nature of the farming, and where they are doing the agriculture work, all this. So in simple, if you look at What type of crops a particular farmer will select, it depends upon so many factors: availability of water, land, inputs, credit, fertilizer, connectivity, market, risk management, availability of farmers. So some states, FPOs, farmers produce organizations, cooperative farming, they're helping the farmer in realizing better market value. That's the reason why farmers are going for this. Again, where land holding size is big and where farmer has risk taking capacity, he is also taking high value crops. However, small farmers seems to be not so interested in switching towards high value crops because of their socio-economic conditions. So, and finally, you have to conclude that market access, demand, technology, risk management, policy, institutional support, credit, land, availability of water, all the resources are considered. Apart from that, marketing, government support, incentives, cooperative farming, FPO, environmental and sustainable considerations, all these are considered. So it appears that cooperative farming, FPOs, so are helping the farmers to switch over towards high value crops. So that is a brief theme. Introduction you have to write. It appears that in recent times many farmers are moving towards cultivation of high value crops, especially floriculture and horticulture in the some of the selected places. And you can take a case study that how FPOs in Himachal Pradesh, FPOs in Maharashtra, FPOs in Uttar Pradesh, farmers are getting benefited. Then factors which are influencing selection of the crops, will list out all the parameters. Finally, will conclude that yes, despite all this, so based on feasibility, profitability, market access, risk, policy support, technology, and farmers' interest, based on that, farmers will select the high value crops. This is a direct question only, not much twisting is there in the question, easy only. Factors influencing farmers' income, agroecological conditions. So again, if you look at technology, market access, socio-economic conditions, risk-taking capacity, so quality inputs, connectivity, sustainability. So if you look at overall, again, various other parameters, cost. So finally you can conclude and say that yes, so these factors are going to help us. So overall we have to look at all the conditions and parameters, and finally not only high value crops should be cultivated by the farmer, because only high value crops are cultivated, their supply would increase and supply of the other crops would come down, which results in food inflation and the other factors, which is generally referred as cobweb phenomenon in agriculture. So to prevent cobweb phenomenon, government should try to promote not only high value crops but also access for other inputs for other crops also. So that should be a balanced answer. So this is called as third question. Now coming to fourth question, elaborate the scope and significance of supply chain management of agricultural commodities in India. Pretty direct question. Earlier also many times questions were asked, and this is direct theme. Key focus of the theme is supply chain management of commodities. Is that in agriculture? Again, major theme is agriculture, and that micro theme is a concept called as supply chain management. This is actually repeated question only. In the previous year they asked a question, discuss the challenges faced by farmers in upstream and downstream marketing. Same concept, only little bit is twisted and is asked as supply chain management and commodities. So if we talk about after a crop is harvested, production of the crop, how it is reaching to the customer at retail price. So in between the various steps that are involved, if you look at supply chain management, both when a farmer is purchasing inputs also and when a farmer is finally selling the agricultural produce also. So what is the meaning of supply chain management? From inputs to the consumer, all the steps which are involved is called as supply chain management in agriculture. Now what do you mean by supply chain management in agriculture, sir? When a farmer is getting input Suppose a farmer is cultivating wheat. So what are the various inputs that are required for the farmer, and in the process from that inputs to overall, finally when he himself is selling his product in the market to a retailer, what are the various steps which are involved? See, if you look at, there are so many current updates with respect to supply chain management, ENOM, Electronic National Agricultural Marketing, cooperative farming, FPOs, farmers produce organizations, better connectivity, storehouse, or you can say warehouse facilities, finance and risk management, where if you look at, many farmers in India are not willing to take their agricultural produce to the nearest APMC. The reason being, they are located far away from their place and are going for distress sale. Distress sale means they are ready to sell at whatever price that is possible in the local market or local to the commission agent. Meaning in the process, commission agent is getting benefited but not the actual farmer. The theme of the story is that farmers are not getting benefited due to the existing supply chain management. It is the middlemen who are actually getting benefited. So we'll be covering input supply, production planning, aggregation, primary handling, post-harvest, storage management, value addition, transportation, logistics, market access, so sustainability and resilience, and finally we'll conclude, yes, government should focus on expanding cold storage network. Government should also provide warehousing facilities, logistics, promote FPOs, cooperative farming, strengthen ENOM, and try to improve agricultural marketing, extension, transportation, and infrastructure services. So instead of just focusing only on some schemes or some just for namesake welfare policies, real development in agriculture is supposed to happen in terms of agriculture infrastructure. So that is the basic theme of this question. So if you look at the essence of the question, supply chain management covers raw material inputs to final product, factors which are influenced by supply chain management, post-harvest management, quality, transportation, storage, all that. Simply you can flowchart, you can tell what are the factors which are being influenced. Then after that, I said, it's not just enough if you give some money to the farmers in the name of some welfare policies. What is actually needed in the agriculture is, in the rural areas, we have to improve the infrastructure facilities, roadway, transportation, storage, so that farmer will in a position to sell for at least reasonable price, if not for distress sale. That is the theme of the question. Now question number 5 is actually science and technology, 6 also science and technology, 7 science and technology, 8 left-wing extremism also science and technology only. If you look at 10th also. Now if you look at, this is a surprise question, because why I am calling it a surprise question? Generally in fiscal policy we focus on Finance Commission, FRBM Act, fiscal consolidation, fiscal stimulus and indicators. But look at the theme of the question. Explain how the fiscal health index can be used as a tool for assessing fiscal performance of states in India. In what way would it encourage the states to adopt prudent and sustainable fiscal policies? See, actually we did not expect this question for fiscal policy, because we thought probably question might come from FRBM Act. But in FRBM Act only, one of the indicators are fiscal prudence. Fiscal prudence means how responsible states and the center while implementing fiscal policy in following the targets. All of you know, according to FRBM targets, we are supposed to maintain certain fiscal discipline regarding revenue expenditure, revenue deficit, fiscal deficit. But question is small deviation from regular FRBM Act, where they are focusing on fiscal health index. See, fiscal health index is actually released by Niti Aayog, measuring state government's financial indicators. So if you look at theme of the question, fiscal health index. First you have to define what is fiscal health index. So who releases fiscal health index? Also you have to broadly talk about Why are we releasing fiscal health index? How is it relevant to FRBM Act to ensure fiscal prudence and fiscal responsibility to control fiscal deficit and revenue deficit? Because just because a state government is spending money, it does not mean that it is developing. You have to look at percentage of capex also, you have to look at percentage of revenue expenditure also. So again, question seems to be influenced by economic survey. Which appears that in vote bank politics, many of the state government fiscal position is a cause of concern. Why fiscal position is a cause of concern? Because to attract the vote bank, to attract the voters in the process of vote bank politics, revenue expenditure seems to be more, capex seems to be less. And some of the states are taking off-budget borrowing rules or off-budget borrowing route. So what is this off-budget borrowing route, sir? Establishing some corporations or quasi-judicial government organizations. Because government already exceeded FRBM limit of borrowing, they are creating some of the quasi-government organizations, and these government organizations are borrowing, and in the process, off-budget borrowing are increasing. So in the context of all this freebies, vote bank politics, increase in revenue expenditure rather than capex, off-budget borrowings, the question is asked, what is fiscal health index? How is this fiscal health index is a better indicator? So if you look at, you have to give an introduction. Who prepares fiscal health index? Simple answer, Niti Aayog. And some data. Recently, Indian state accounts for 2/3 the public spending, 1/3 of the total revenues. So in economic survey summary, a particular article was talking about how the debt burden of the states is increasing. Again, fiscal health index pillars are there. This fiscal health index 5 pillars are there. You have to list out. So for example, what are these 5 pillars, sir? So quality of expenditure. What do you meaning of quality of expenditure, sir? It's not enough if you just spend the money, whether it is revenue expenditure or capital expenditure. If capital expenditure is more, which means income generation capacity will increase in the future. At the sake of vote bank politics, if only revenue expenditure is more, it may serve the purpose or not. Second, revenue mobilization, which means how that particular state government is able to get the funds, tax sources, non-tax sources, all that. Apart from that, if you look at how well fiscal discipline is maintained by the state, which is called as fiscal prudence, which means is really state government responsible in handling public resources. Now, apart from that, debt index, which means what is the present position of the debt of the state and what is the liability. So debt sustainability, within how many years state will be able to pay back the debt. Does state financial resources really support the current debt liability of the state? So in fiscal health index, these are the 5 pillars, and look at overall. You can compare the multiple state performance. Also, the policymakers can understand better and they can plan accordingly, and they can come up with real diagnosis of why a particular state financial position is good, why a particular state financial position is not so good, and you can tell that it's not just enough if you just spend only money. Capex percentage also we have to look at. So broad theme is that state's debt burden is increasing, percentage of capital expenditure seems to be low, percentage of revenue expenditure seems to be high. So whether it will be sustainable or not, that is the theme of the question, fiscal health index. So what is fiscal health index? You will define public spending, state spending, who released, Niti Aayog, then 5 pillars also. What are the pillars of fiscal health index? How fiscal health index can be assessed to state fiscal financial position, comparison, trade, percentage of capex, so incentives, all that. Finally, the moral of the question is that state and center both should follow fiscal prudence, because ultimately public has given power to the government to use public funds for the public welfare. If fiscal prudence is not followed, if public funds are not used properly, if public is not looking, or if government is not looking at the debt burden seems to be unsustainable in the future. Our per capita income should increase but not per capita debt. In fact, government should focus on following golden rule of borrowing. The borrowed money should be used for income generation activities. It should not be used merely for attracting vote bank politics, which results in debt trap. So get the states out of debt trap. So follow the golden rule of borrowing, invest on capital expenditure, spend on capital expenditure, increase income generation capacity. That should be in the conclusion. So this is about 11th question. Then coming to 12th question. Discuss the rationale of production linked incentive scheme. What are its achievements? In what way can the functioning and outcome of the scheme be improved? This also direct expected question only, easy question only, seems to be expected theme also. Now, why this question is being asked, sir? See, broader theme is industry chapter, and that micro theme is actually the scheme called PLI, Production Linked Incentive Scheme. Even though scheme was announced in 2020, 5 years old, but why this question seems to be asked? We are following the newspapers regularly and the current affairs. So India is popularly called as office of the world, and China is popularly called as factory of the world. So in the context, India is trying to improve its manufacturing capabilities to give a stiff competition to China. So in the context of that, to promote India's secondary sector and to make India one of the tough competitors in manufacturing sector, government launched so many schemes. In that, one of the scheme is actually called as Production Linked Incentive Scheme. So in 2020, government came up with this scheme. In this scheme, in various sectors, government is going to provide incentives, government is going to give tax holiday, and whoever is part of this scheme, for them government is going to offer all kind of incentives so that our manufacturing capabilities will be improved. Apart from that, China is known for economies of scale because of automation in the production process. But India is still in the process of mechanization and automation. Still our industries are MSME, still our industries use labor intensive methods. Comparatively, production cost is more in India, so we need to improve our manufacturing skills. We need to focus on skilled workforce. We need to focus on improving investment and technology on manufacturing, so that in future India would also become global competitor to China in terms of production and secondary sector. Because all of us know secondary sector growth got stagnated right from independence to 1991. So after 1991 economic reforms, industrial policy in 1991, so increasing FDI in various sectors, so attracting more and more investment. All this we are doing in the process so that our secondary sector growth also seems to be influencing or to be increasing. National manufacturing policy, National Investment and Manufacturing Zone, SEZ, Special Economic Zone, Make in India, Startup India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So you can mention whatever you remember as part of value addition. But the theme is outcomes of the scheme also is asked. A little bit trap. If it is a general overall question, that's fine, you can quote. But outcome of the scheme is also asked. So whenever they ask about outcome of the scheme called Production Linked Incentive Scheme, so we should maintain some data in which we are trying to say, because of Production Linked Incentive Scheme, there is a shift from Make in India to Make for the World. Make in India to Make for the World. Not just let's manufacture goods for ourselves, let's also manufacture the goods which are on par with the global standards. That's why not just Make in India alone, a shift from Make in India to Make for the World. Apart from that, we are trying to promote as much as possible investment assistance for MSMEs, so that if your secondary sector, electronic manufacturing, pharma manufacturing, solar, if our secondary sector growth gets increased, if India's secondary sector growth along with employment generation is happening, it also helps in achieving our $5 trillion target. It also helps in achieving our Viksit Bharat. That should be your conclusion, because briefly define why PLI scheme was started, in which year it was started, what are the reason why it was started, and why industrial sector got stagnated, what are the various steps that are taken by the government. In the process, try to come up by linking how PLI incentives such as tax intensive, tax holiday, factors of production at affordable prices, and government institutional credit, all this helped in bringing up secondary sector growth. So theme is industry in that secondary sector, in that PLI scheme. Maybe 5 years is over for the scheme. That's the reason why it appeared that examiner was interested in this question called PLI, production linked incentive scheme. So this is about actually question number 12. And this is again direct question from agriculture chapter. Examine the factors responsible for depleting groundwater in India. What are the steps taken by government to mitigate such depletion of groundwater? So direct question only from agriculture. Theme is water and irrigation. Agriculture chapter. Micro theme is water and irrigation. Now in this micro theme, water and irrigation, the question primary focus is on why groundwater is getting depleted in India, and schemes also. What are the steps taken by the government? So this is the broad theme of the question. All of us know that India is around 18% of the global population. Around only 3% of global water resources are available in India, and scarcity of water is not just problem in only some part of India, almost all the states. So you can quote recent water crisis in Bangalore. So in summer, in metropolitan cities also groundwater table is getting depleted. In the rural area, as many of the farmers are using bore wells, naturally groundwater table is not getting revived. See, just because rainfall occurs, automatically groundwater table will not be revived unless there are trees have deep roots and the water has to inside, then only groundwater table will be revived. Conversion of agricultural land into non-agricultural purposes and cultivation of crops which are mostly high value crops which requires water intensive crops, unsustainable practices, also more bore wells, lack of percolation tanks. Like earlier, the sustainable methods and sustainable practices were not followed, because of which, if you look at cultivation of paddy, cultivation of sugarcane, water intensive crops, low irrigation efficiency, declining rainfall reliability, urbanization, conversion of agriculture into non-agricultural areas, diverting water from agricultural purpose to non-agricultural purpose, unsustainable use of water, and because of pre-power in some states, there is no rationalization of use of the water. So because of various reasons, factors responsible for groundwater depletion, agriculture factors, climatic factors, socio-economic factors, weak regulation, and over or excess use of the water. So apart from that, second part of the question talks about schemes taken by the government, initiatives taken by the government. So you can focus on Jal Shakti, Atal Bhujal Yojana, Accelerated Irrigation Benefit Program, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, Perg Drop More Crop, National Watershed Mission, Watershed Project, Groundwater Regulation. Also, developing community assets in MG Narega scheme, percolation tanks, watershed project, all this we can link to second part of the theme. Direct question, agriculture, not much difficult. Those who have read agriculture themes and micro themes, they'll be able to answer. Probably will end with linking the answer to sustainable development goal, where water is also one of the sustainable development goals. So a better answer, valid answer, and value addition can be link water. So whichever is sustainable development goal related to water, you can link. So as part of achieving sustainable development goals, conservation of water is very much important, and also water is source of life. Blue economy, it is very significant. So we should know for sustainable use of water resources. So this is about question number 13 from agriculture LN. Question number 4. This also direct question from agriculture, expected question. Actually, food processing or animal husbandry or fisheries. Alternatively, questions are being repeated. So this year, examine the scope of food processing industries in India. Elaborate the measures taken by the government in food processing industries for generating employment opportunities. Food processing industry is expected theme. However, point to be remembered in the demand of the question is, we have to write in such a way how it generates employment opportunities. Key theme is food processing industry, but supporting argument you have to mention employment opportunities. So question number 14 also direct. Theme is agriculture and related sector. In agriculture and related sector, we are talking about food processing industry, and key demand of the question is employment generation. So briefly, we'll be introducing the importance of food processing industry. So food processing industry is generally defined as converting the raw materials in agriculture into a finished product which provides time utility, shapeability, and increase the shelf life of agricultural goods. So much of agriculture crop is being wasted, which should be converted into a better finished product. Shelf life also will be given. Broadly, you can quote the data also from food processing industry, where India is the world's second largest producer of fruits and vegetables. Around this much production of milk. So India is one of the largest producer of fruits, vegetables, milk, food grains, and so on. So huge employment opportunities created in the rural area and semi-urban area when you link agricultural produce with the food processing industry. Horizontal integration and vertical integration of farm. So actually, if you look at mega food parks are being organized, Prime Minister's scheme for formalization of micro and small and medium enterprises is offered, 100% FDI is permitted in automatic routine food processing, and in fact in the urban area, the processed food demand is increasing because of change in urban lifestyle. So Angel's Law, Bennett's Law. As a person's income increases, expenditure on non-food items increases. If a person's income increases, food and health conscious food also increases. So in the urban areas, there is more new trend towards food processing or processed food consumption. So huge demand is there. But the second part of the question is related to employment generation. So where you can link agriculture is having disguised unemployment, seasonal unemployment, and farmers are not having guarantee of source of income. So it is better if you focus on establishment of food processing industries to address seasonal unemployment, disguised unemployment. Also some kind of guaranteed source of income would be available to one family member in a farmer. So finally we'll conclude, food processing industry is still in initial stages only in India. Still proper infrastructure, credit access is not available. But in future, if you can invest in food processing industry, so India can emerge as global kitchen of the world. And in fact, India's dishes are popular across the world. India's processed food is known across the world. And India's special non-vegetarian food is also known across the world. Gradually, India can emerge as one of the global kitchen of the world. So this is about broad idea about food processing industry, but we should not forget in the second part of the question how it helps in generation of employment opportunities. Food processing industry definition. Why is it required? Skill development, agro processing, employment generation, and finally conclusion. So question seems to be from agriculture only, direct question, food processing industry. Only thing we should try to focus more on employment generation, government schemes also. And question number 15, again from agriculture only, if you look at direct question only. How does nanotechnology offer significant advancements in the field of agriculture? How can this technology help to uplift socio-economic status of farmers? So if you look at, theme is again agriculture only. In agriculture, maybe technology, science and technology combined with agriculture. Use of nanotechnology in agriculture. Maybe liquid nano area, nano sensors, nano fertilizers, nano particles. That's the reason why this question seems to be picked up by the examiner, because of current affairs dynamics called liquid nano area. So that's the reason why this question used to be taken. But again, briefly we'll define what is nanotechnology. So how in India we have been using this, where are we are using this nanotechnology. So briefly you can tell about nano fertilizers, nano pesticides, nano sensors, post-harvest and food safety, and genetic approvals. So if you look at strain resistant, different types. So which means briefly we'll define India's nanotechnology mission 2007, ICAR, Indian Council of Agricultural Research. So overview of all that we will write. Also will focus on the benefits of nanotechnology to Indian agriculture and Namo Kisan Didi drones. So recent schemes announced by the government where, of course, use of technology in agriculture was asked earlier, but this year yield will increase, better market access, value addition, high productivity, sustainability, cost will come down. While you can quote, yes, nanotechnology is used widely in agriculture in various sectors, in various levels, seeds, fertilizers, water, irrigation, herbigation, all that. It appears that still farmers are not so well versed with mechanization and use of technology and technical equipment. So this is a brief theme. Anyway, direct question only from this. Again, one more economy question if you look at question number 16. This is direct question only. Again, not much difficult question, easy question only, expected theme only, because many times in current affairs it's semiconductor manufacturing, government permission. So the reason why this question seems to be picked up is actually in Assam, in Gujarat. So if you look at in 3 places, Government of India permitted manufacturing of semiconductor chips. So if you look at indigenous manufacturing of semiconductors was highlighted in the articles. That's the reason why this question seems to be picked up by the examiner. And this is from current affairs only, industry chapter. Now you all of us know that semiconductors are used in almost all modern day electronic items. LED, LCD, glow LED, OLED, automobiles, everywhere almost. So this is from industry chapter, and from industry chapter, semiconductor, India semiconductor mission. This is the broad theme we should mention in the answer. So why this question seems to be important? Because India's electronic industry is heavily dependent on semiconductor chips from Taiwan, China. Anything that is impacting global supply chain is also impacting us directly. That's the reason why government focused on indigenous manufacturing of semiconductor chips and various microchip manufacturing. That's the reason why India Semiconductor Mission was launched. Of course, India Semiconductor Mission was launched in 2021. So even the mission was launched in 2021, recently government permitted establishment of semiconductor manufacturing plant in Gujarat and Assam. So with the collaboration of private companies, 3 semiconductor indigenous manufacturing plants were established: Assam, Dholera and Sanand, and Assam also one more place. So because of all this, the question seems to be important. So briefly explain why India wants to become semiconductor manufacturing hub, supply chain, infrastructure deficiency, talented workforce is there. So 2021 around 76,000 crore is allocated for semiconductor mission, semiconductor fab, so compound semiconductors, DLI, design linked incentive scheme, ecosystem development, talent and skill development initiatives, R&D boost, all this. Finally, you can quote, it is good that we diversified our semiconductor manufacturing dependence on external sector by promoting our own domestic manufacturing. And you can quote, in India semiconductor manufacturing hub, so India wants to become leader for semiconductor manufacturing. Also domestic input should be explained and infrastructure should be strengthened, improvement research and development technology. And so if you look at, government should focus on continuous support as semiconductor manufacturing is still infant industry in India. So this is overview of economic questions. Broadly you have to conclude that it takes a lot of time because still India is in the process of developing indigenous technology on semiconductor manufacturing. Skill development also is required, human resource development, investment assistance, all are required for semiconductor manufacturing. So if you look at what is semiconductors, why is it important, and why India is dependent on external sector, so what are the factors that are responsible, India semiconductor mission, brief outline, all that. So in simple, if you look at, these are questions that are being asked in GS paper 3 economy aspect. So the broad theme that the questions were asked is international trade, protectionism versus multilateralism. And from agriculture, we talked about high value crops. So if you look at each question by was, then human development index and inequality human development index, that is from growth perspective. Then from industry chapter, semiconductor industry, food processing industry. So if you look at question by wise, agriculture, cropping pattern, why high value crops were selected, and supply chain management also static part only. So fiscal health index is a surprise because probably we won't expect this type of question for mains, but still we should be ready for some unexpected things also, because UPSC always is known for expect the unexpected things. So fiscal health index is surprising question definitely. Industry chapter PLI is relatively easy only. Agriculture, water irrigation also relatively easy question only. Agriculture, FPA, food processing industry also relatively easy only. Nanotechnology, but nanotechnology was asked last time. Previous theme was use of technology in agriculture. Overview was asked. So maybe next year, use of drones in agriculture. So expected themes. Again, industry chapter, semiconductor industry. So the moral of the story is that for GS paper 3 mains, we should compulsorily focus on high yielding areas. That high yielding areas are actually called as agriculture. Minimum 3 to 4 questions. Industry. This year around 2 questions. Apart from fiscal policy budgeting this year, so if you look at fiscal health index, and this lesson from this is that don't focus not only on static part but also current affairs, but also economic survey, but also budget related to that topic. That is what the lesson that you have to learn from this fiscal health index question. Now apart from that, be ready to face static as well as current questions also, because in some of the questions static as well as current. And inclusive growth, slightly this year directly the question from inclusive growth is not asked. Broader theme around inclusive growth is asked. That is only inequality human development index, inequality adjusted human development index. So apart from that, infrastructure, surprisingly this year question is missing. Roadway, railway, aviation. Earlier they used to ask definitely one question from any of this roadway, railway, aviation. Maybe that's the reason why examiner is not asking. Service sector also question did not come. Infrastructure also question did not come. Maybe next year service sector or infrastructure may be highlighted. Poverty and employment also not much question. Planning Niti Aayog also not much question. So maybe employment generation in food processing industry was asked. So that's the reason why broadly for mains perspective you have to cover agriculture, industry, investment models. This year no question. Public private partnership, nothing was asked. Poverty and employment, maybe unemployment was touched. So employment was touched. Planning and Niti Aayog, so this year no question. And infrastructure and services also no question this year. So probably we cannot guarantee next year maybe more questions come from these themes also. So briefly, the aspirant supposed to prepare the syllabus, theme, micro topic, micro theme, and lesson from this year is that also prepare current affairs of the topic for last 1 year also. Look at the summary of that in budget also. Look at the summary of that in economic survey also. So if you do all this, GS paper 3 seems to be relatively okay, doable. Of course, lengthy only as usual. Wherever you feel data is more, schemes are more, information is more, go for chart, diagram, representation, so the time will be saved. So this is all briefly about GS paper 3 discussion of 2025. Thank you.
सारा भी आसे